So let's talk a little bit about ATP. This is something I think most people have heard of, adenosine triphosphate. This is a universal currency of energy. So ATP can be used to give energy to reactions that are building molecules in chemical reactions, and it can also be used in energy to transport and move molecules, organelles, and individuals around. ATP is made from a process called cellular respiration, where we break down sugar and generate energy. And ATP is going to cycle between ATP and ADP. So if we look at the actual molecule here of ATP, it's got this adenosine piece, and then triphosphate means it's got 3 phosphate groups attached to it. And I said it's going to cycle between ADP and ATP. ADP is adenosine diphosphate, and it just has 2 phosphate groups. So in this cycle, we have ATP. ATP is going to give up a phosphate group and in the process provide energy for cells. And then we take ADP. We're going to need to add a phosphate group back onto this, and we're going to get the energy to rebuild that from our food. If we want to understand how ATP itself actually works, it works through a process called phosphorylation. Phosphorylation is when you add a phosphate group to a molecule or group of molecules. Phosphate groups actually have a high negative charge, and if you put several phosphates next to each other, it takes a lot of energy to pack those in because it's going to be difficult to get 2 or 3 negative charges to sit right next to each other. So ATP has the 3 phosphates, and it's pretty willing to give up one of those because it's got 2 other ones. So here we're going to try and again take molecule A and molecule B and put them together into molecule AB. And this is going to take energy. When we need energy, we're going to get that from ATP. So ATP is going to give up one of its phosphate groups. That phosphate group is going to be bonded, in this case, to a B, and now it's at a higher energy state. Because we've added this very strongly negatively charged molecule, it's at a higher energy state. It now is high enough that releasing the phosphate group will release energy, and the A and the B can come together. So if you notice, the energy level of A and B is down here. The energy level of AB combined is up here. But if we add a phosphate group to this mix, the energy level is up here, and the overall molecule can go downhill to make the final molecule. I know that's a lot of technical chemistry, so I have a less technical analogy for you. Many of you are familiar with Mario Kart, or you have seen someone else play this game, and you're driving along, you go through different obstacles, you're trying to beat other people, and every once in a while you can drive through a box or some kind of icon that will give you a super boost of energy. And all of a sudden, for 2 seconds, you're faster than everyone else, and you can go flying by them because you have this extra little boost of energy. That's what happens when you add a phosphate group to a molecule. It's a regular old molecule, it's tooling along, you add a phosphate group and it gets a sudden burst of energy. It's not going to last very long, but it's going to last long enough so that maybe you can bond with another molecule, or you can go flying past everyone else in the race. So again, back to this picture, we've added the Mario boost here, we've got our extra energy, and now this bonding can occur. So every time you think of ATP helping a chemical reaction, think of it as a small power boost to that particular chemical reaction. Metabolic rate is a concept most of us have heard about, but I want to put it in context of what we're talking about here in terms of ATP and enzymes. Your metabolic rate is a sum of all of the chemical reactions that are happening in your body. Your basal metabolic rate is your metabolic rate when you're at rest. So when you're not up and walking around, but you're sitting in a chair, awake and alert, that would be your basal metabolic rate. And we typically measure your basal metabolic rate as the amount of oxygen you're consuming while you're sitting in one place. But that's really just a proxy for all the chemical reactions in your body, because the amount of oxygen you're consuming is directly related to how much ATP you're making, and how much ATP you're making is directly related to how many chemical reactions you're doing. So we've got ATP, oxygen, and chemical reactions all working together here. So based on what we've talked about so far, here's a couple questions I want you to think about. What does it mean if someone has a slow or fast metabolism? How does ATP relate to the metabolic rate? How do enzymes influence the metabolic rate? And what kind of biomolecules are enzymes? These are good review questions and applications to the human body of what we've talked about in this lecture.